Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar on navigating the end of a golden visa. As you all know, the end is imminent. So the question now is how to steer and how to take opportunity from this last chance to get the golden visa. I am Philip. I am project manager at Rossio Palace. And in this webinar, I will help you understand better the situation. First of all, demystify some of the misconceptions regarding the law and regarding the process of applying and getting the golden visa. Secondly, I will present you on how to invest in Rossio Palace. What is unique and distinctive about Rossio Palace as an asset and also as a business. And finally, in the last part of the webinar, I will cover how to apply, and specifically how to apply in time, because time is of the essence now, using our fast track application process, and then explaining you what are the next steps you can take to be part of that. So let's start with demystifying. You probably have been following the news, and it is a little confusing at the moment. So let me start by bringing some clarity on precisely the law. And I'm going to pick a few things that have been published in the news or are being asked by our clients, and I will demystify. Is it a myth? Is it a fact? And then I will share some more insights on them. The first one is new golden visa applications are frozen. There has been some articles in the media saying that, or stating, or at least implying that. Is that true? So let's look at what is behind it. As you know, the government, the Portuguese government, proposed a series of measures to combat the housing crisis. And among those measures, one of those is to stop with new golden visas. So basically ending the program. And that meeting happened in the 16th of February. Now, that meeting was to put forth a proposal to change the law. Has it already happened? What is the law at the moment? The government has published a draft of that proposal recently, and in that draft, it says, and this is the sentence that is bringing all the speculation, in that draft, which is preliminary, is full of mistakes, it's still very ambiguous, very rough, but it says that the applications submitted until the 16th of February are not affected by any change in law. It doesn't say what happens after the 16th of February. It doesn't state that. Of course, you can speculate what do they mean when they write something on the draft and put the date of February 16th. Is it a placeholder date, which they will eventually revise? Is it just something that is not, it's too preliminary to have any meaning? Is it a typo? What is it? So for those of you who have actually read it and the entire package, it is indeed a very, very rough package, full of mistakes, as I mentioned, typos, grammatical errors. So it is very, very preliminary. It is still in public discussion. It hasn't even been submitted to Parliament for voting. So where do we stand now? As of now, the applications are not frozen. The law hasn't changed, and the law is the law. There is a golden visa law, and CEF, which is the government entity that is responsible for the management of golden visa applications, is accepting applications. We are submitting applications right now in CEF's online portal, and CEF is obliged to follow the law. There's no other alternative. They have to process applications that are sent according to the law at this very moment, and the law has not changed, and that is important to understand. Therefore, the new applications being frozen is a myth. It is not happening. Applications are not frozen. They are still going on within the current law. What about a second point, which is the new law will be voted on the 16th of March, so next week. Is it true? Is it a true statement or not? Let me clarify what will happen on the 16th. It's not a voting on the law. What's happening on the 16th is a meeting of the government. It's the Council of Ministers that is meeting in the same way that they met on February the 16th. The same thing. They meet, and the purpose of that meeting, or one of the purposes, there are many topics on the agenda. One of the purposes is to discuss the public discussion on this package, the housing meant to address the housing crisis. So this whole package. Following that meeting, after that meeting, then yes, then the final draft of the law will be sent to Parliament, and then yes, it will be voted in Parliament, because only the Parliament has the competence to vote and change the law. The government cannot do that. The government can issue decrees, and they can do that. They can, of course, change the decree that they have issued without consulting the Parliament. But they can only change a law if the Parliament votes in favor. The government has majority in Parliament, so indeed they can approve the law, but they still need to follow the procedure. And that voting is quite complex because it's an enormous package. It's more than 20 measures that are being voted, some of them very, very contentious, even unconstitutional. Therefore, it's probably going to have very heated debates, and it's a process that in itself cannot take less than a week. So 1 week is the minimum after the 16th that the government will need in order to present the final draft of the proposal to the Parliament, and then the voting to take place. And the voting happens in general terms, and then specifically article by article and clause by clause. After this, it will still have to go to the President for ratification, and only then it can be published and be officially enforced. Therefore, this claim that the new law will be voted on the 16th is also a myth. It's not correct. It's only the government meeting, the Council of Ministers, that is happening on the 16th. And of course, we'll be following that very closely because it will bring us further insights. The third point, there will be no grace period or no transition period, meaning when the law is approved, it will be enforced, enacted as soon as possible, without a transition period. It is common to have transition periods, especially when abrupt changes are proposed. However, it doesn't seem that the government wants to do that. And that is clear from the draft that is now in public discussion, where the government states that as soon as the law is enforced or is approved, it will be enforced. So there's no mention of any grace or transition period. Therefore, this claim is indeed a fact. So where does that leave us? If there's no grace period, how soon could the new law be enforced and therefore the golden visa terminated? It's hard to say because there are many factors, including how long the discussion in Parliament will take. Also, if the president will approve or not, will ratify or not the legislation. He has already hinted that he may send the legislation to the Constitutional Court, which could add some timing to the process. However, it's very possible that in the beginning of April, the new law is enforced. And that's why we are in a race against time. Without a grace period, it's possible that beginning of April, meaning basically we can count on having this month to submit applications. Number 4, there will be retroactive effects. That's at least some interpretations of what the government intends to do, especially if it would freeze applications right now when the new law has not been applied. That would mean that whoever is applying now would have a retroactive effect because a law that doesn't exist would affect. Is that possible? That is not possible. Under the Portuguese constitution, which is the most fundamental law in the country, and it's, by the way, the law that the president is supposed to protect, and it's what he does, in fact. Under that law, it is not possible to have a law that is bringing retroactive effects, meaning having effects back in time. So if the government grants something, it cannot come later and take it over based on a new law. That cannot happen. If that were to happen, besides violating the constitution, and it's something that the president would not allow, and not least the Constitutional Court, but if that were to happen hypothetically, the government would just be flooded with court cases that it would be doomed because there's no chance in violating the constitution and getting away with it. So even if the government would want to apply it retroactively, it would not be possible. And there was, a while ago, there was a change also in the golden visa law, which required that to gain the permanent residency or the citizenship, it became necessary to have a language exam. That's how the law is today. But in the beginning, it was not like that. There was no need for a language exam. The government then changed the law, approved the new law, where it made it mandatory to have this language exam. The question then was, will this have retroactive effects on those who already applied? They are already renewing their golden visas. Will they have to do a language exam at the end? And of course, the answer is no. Even though the new law meant that the new golden visa applications would have to do that language exam, those who applied before the law and were in the middle of the process didn't have to make that exam. So they got their residency permits and citizenships without the language exam. Therefore, this statement, there will be retroactive effects, is also a myth. Statement number 5, all golden visa types will end. This new legislation stems from a problem with housing, residential. Housing prices have increased dramatically over the years, and now the population is resenting that and protesting because it's unaffordable to either buy or rent a house for the general population. So as part of this package, the government wants to terminate all golden visas. Is that true, or only the residential investments? Because let's face it, investments in commercial properties like offices and hotels have little to do with the residential business. That's very different sectors, let alone other types of golden visas like job creation, investing in companies, or investing in cultural activities. What does that have to do with residential? However, here it seems that the government is putting all the golden visa in the same bucket and is terminating all the golden visas regardless of the types. So this statement here is in reality a fact. Even though it's not the most logical, that's what the government wants. And the last statement, residential investments will be affected. Is this a myth or a fact? Residential is at the epicenter of this entire set of proposals. So there will be some effects. And the effects are that the government is now abolishing new licenses for short-term rentals. So short-term rentals, the likes of Airbnb and Booking.com, will no longer be possible. And of course, this will affect residential investments because they can no longer have that option to monetize the investment. And then another measure is that the government doesn't want vacant houses. So the law will change and will not allow houses to be vacant. They have to be either rented long-term or they have to be used by the owners or their family members. So of course, this will have constraints. It will put some constraints on residential investments, also in golden visa investments. Now, what about other types of investments? Namely, commercial real estate, office space, shops, hotels, such as Rossio Palace. Of course, those are not affected by these constraints because it's a very different use. You cannot use a commercial property for residential purposes. That's not possible. The law doesn't even allow that. So you cannot live permanently in a hotel, or you cannot rent a hotel long-term for someone to live there. In the same way, you cannot do that with office space, with the factory, with the shop, etc. So this is a fact. For the residential investments, there will be some constraints. All right, so this is an overview of some of the statements regarding the law. But what about regarding the process of investing in golden visa? Let's look at a few of them and let's distinguish the myth from the facts. First of all, I need a Portuguese tax ID to apply, the so-called NIF. That is a fact. So in order to apply for the golden visa, to make the investment, a tax ID in Portugal is necessary for the main applicant and also for the spouse. That's why the process starts precisely with getting the NIF. To getting the NIF is quite simple. It's done online with the passport, with the proof of address. That's all. Statement number 2, opening a bank account in Portugal takes months. Is that true or is that not true? Not necessarily. On average, it's true that opening a bank account takes months. It's true. It can take 4 weeks. It can take 6 weeks, even 8 weeks. So 2 months. However, the speed at opening a bank account is highly dependent on 2 things. First of all, the nationality. Some nationalities are easier to open the bank account because of the compliance. And the other factor is the bank itself, and in particular the branch of the bank. So even though on average opening a bank account takes months, it is a myth that all bank accounts take months to open. For example, we have a partnership with our bank account, our corporate bank account, so our clients can open their bank accounts if they are from US, UK, and Brazil in a week. They have their bank accounts open and operational. And it's one of the big banks in Portugal. And the reason we can do this is because a special partnership we have with the bank. The third statement, documents need to be legalized for the golden visa process, either with the apostille in the Hague Convention or by going to the Portuguese consulate in the home country. Is that true? It is indeed true. The golden visa requires some of the documents, not all, but some of the documents like the tax ID, birth certificates, criminal records, they need to be legalized. The legalization process can, of course, take time. And there are two ways to go about it. One way is to use companies. We work with some of them that help expedite the process, both of getting the documents, for example, criminal records with the FBI, and also getting the apostille, speeding up, accelerating that process so that it can be done in a matter of weeks instead of months as it could otherwise take. Now, submitting a golden visa application without the documents legalized, is that possible? Is that a risk? Well, the documents need to be legalized for the golden visa to be approved. That's a fact. If upon submission, a document is not legalized, for example, it has been requested but it hasn't arrived, that doesn't disqualify the application. What happens is it cannot be approved, but by law, CEF, the entity that manages the golden visa, needs to give a chance to the applicants to provide that documentation. Normally, they give a short time, but it can be extended. So it's 10 work days, but it can be extended to 30 work days. However, of course, that the documents need to come for the application to be approved. The application cannot be rejected solely because upon submission, a document was missing. The reasons that an application can be rejected is, of course, if there's something wrong with the criminal record, if there's something wrong with the investment, it's not eligible, etc. Those are the reasons that disqualify an application. However, again, this is a fact. The documents are needed. And also, after the biometrics appointment, those documents need to be submitted, the original, the physical documents, while the application is done online. The fourth statement, I can apply online, is true. Though the application in CEF can be done online without the original documents. As I mentioned, they are only needed later when the biometric appointments is scheduled. Then all those documents need to be submitted. So this is a fact that it's possible to apply online, and it's also possible to have the NIF, the bank account opening online, using the power of attorney, working with your attorney. Number 5, there is a 1-year backlog for CEF to analyze the golden visa submissions. This is true. It's actually even a little more than a year. So right now they are working on applications of the 22nd of December, 2021. That's the latest that they have approved. So it's quite a long backlog. Now, it is expected to reduce for 2 reasons. Number 1, because the government has taken some measures, including renewing automatically and online the applications. Of course, that takes some work, so offload some work from the CEF employees. And also CEF has been reinforced. There are more resources now than there were just a few months ago. And finally, a very important, of course, factor is that golden visa is ending. So there will be no new golden visa submitted after the new law is enforced. So of course, then CEF will only have the backlog. It will not have new applications coming. So with all these factors in mind, it is possible that even though it's a fact that right now there is a 1-year backlog, it is possible that that backlog is going to reduce over the next few months. And the final statement is, in this whole process, at the end, there are buyback guarantees, 100% buyback guarantees. Is this real or is this a myth? And there is no such thing as 100% buyback guarantee for a simple reason. If you read the contracts, you will see that it's a myth, because the contract has an escape clause that allows the developers to escape this buyback obligation for a mere penalty fee of around 9,000, in some cases 10,000 euros. So a very small amount, and they are released from this obligation to buyback. So is there such thing as a guaranteed buyback? Cannot call it guaranteed buyback because there is no guarantee. That's the reality. So now that we have demystified some of the aspects of the law and some of the aspects of the golden visa process, let's move to the investment. And I'm going to present you an investment that is very distinctive, both in terms of the assets that you will be investing in and also on the business underlying that asset. And then in the end, we'll talk about the application and how you can do that application in time. So in summary, the asset Rossio Palace as an investment has 4 key points. The first one is it's a unique historical palace. It's not a normal building, it's a palace with all its imponents, its significance. The second aspect is it's a very high quality project. It has been designed by a team of Portuguese architects on the outside, and then all the interior Nordic designs led by a famous Danish designer, Nadia Lassen. And the project is going to reconvert the palace and the property in a hotel unit with 50 hotel rooms, spacious rooms. These are apartment rooms, not the small typical hotel rooms. The third aspect of this investment is on the financial side. There is a yield when the hotel opens of 4 to 6%, which is dependent on the gross operating profit of the hotel. So that gross operating profit has a part going to the hotel management company and the part going to the investors as dividends. And the projected yield is 4 to 6%, starting in 2025 when the hotel operation begins. And then at the end of 7 years, there will be a sale of the entire property where all the investors are required to sell their shares. And in this sale, 50% of the capital appreciation upon the sale goes to the developer and 50% goes to the investors as a remuneration for that sale. So they also benefit from the upside of the sale, besides the yield, as long as investors hold a share in the property. And then the last point is that as an investment, Rossio Palace offers a protection. Given the imminent change in the law, there are some risks in applying, namely the risk that you will not have the application ready in time. And therefore, Rossio Palace offers a protection against a change in the law that would prevent you from getting the golden visa. So if something is outside your control, then that is 100% insured. Of course, that you don't get the legal fees that you will spend, but they are minor. So the legal fees of having the NIF and opening the bank account, and also eventually paying for the initial payment for CEF, but those are less than 2,000 euros, and it gives you the chance to do the investment and get the golden visa for you and your family. So these are the 4 main points of the investment. Now let me delve onto some of them so you understand better what is so distinctive about Rossio Palace. Let's start with the region. Rossio Palace is located in Alentejo. It's a region of Portugal in between Lisbon and Algarve, known by its nature. It's a region of peace, of tranquility, medieval landscape, so a lot of very old villages and towns, and it's becoming the next frontier of tourism in Portugal. And part of it is driven by the recognition it is gaining outside Portugal. Last year, for example, Time magazine selected Alentejo as one of the 50 extraordinary destinations to explore in the world. And in November, the Portuguese government made a big marketing campaign in Times Square. If you happen to be there on the 16th or 19th of November, for an hour, the landscape of Alentejo was shown all around the screens in Times Square. And all this increasing internal awareness is translating into tourism in the region, in particular in the number of hotel guests, which has been steadily increasing over the years. Then, of course, COVID brought those numbers very much down. There was a mild recovery after, and last year, record number of hotel guests in Alentejo, almost following the trend pre-COVID. And the same picture happens in the occupancy rates, which have been climbing up, brought down by COVID, and then a stark rebound last year. So where exactly are we in Portugal? Here's a map of Portugal. It's not that big of a country. You have Lisbon, the capital here, and Rossio Palace is located 2 hours from Lisbon, close to the border with Spain. And this map of Portugal has different colors. They represent the quality of life index in the country, which is measured every year by a company called Marktest. And the latest index that was published shows that Rossio Palace is in the municipality of the country, out of 308 municipalities, is the municipality with the highest quality of life in the entire country. And also the other municipalities around are where you can see the green colors, as opposed to the cities like Lisbon and Porto in the north, which have the red, meaning they have the lower quality of life indexes. Part of the reason for this high quality of life is related to the natural park which surrounds the area. You can see here on the picture, Rossio Palace, the main building is here, and then the remaining buildings of the property around it. And it's in the center of a medieval village, surrounded by the natural park of São Mamede, which is the park in Portugal with the most biodiversity. So this is, of course, one of the key attractiveness of the region. Other points of interest are the castles, the medieval castles around. This one, for example, is in Marvão, very close to the border with Spain. It was used to defend the border against potential invasions from Spain. Very close to Rossio Palace, a few minutes away, is a big lake where it's possible to do activities, swim, fish, etc. Alentejo, as almost any part of Portugal, is also a big wine producing region. So, of course, wine is a big part of the local tradition. Then there are all the activities in the natural park itself. There's the golf in this place, Marvão, where the castle is. And finally, all the towns and villages around. So to get there, to Rossio Palace, the most common gateway is through Lisbon. Lisbon Airport is well connected to the other side of the Atlantic, to the rest of Europe, even though there are other airports in the area, including one in Spain, Badajoz, close by, 1 hour and 20 minutes away. So let me show you now the property as it is today. So here are some pictures of the main palace building, and you can see the level of ornaments in the facade, which are a testament to the wealth of the family that were the owners. This family, the Costa, they were the big landowners in the region, also the big employers in the region. And here's a picture taken from the main square in the village, where you can see the facade of the main building. And here a picture from the inside, with very high ceilings, very nice stucco details and decorations. This palace is of a special value and symbolism for the region. When there is an official celebration, like you see here on this picture, it happens with the palace as a backdrop. And here on the right, you can see photos taken from the inside of the palace for the TV series O Nosso Consul, which is airing on national television. So these are some Portuguese actors inside the palace that were during the recordings. The palace is also filled with the memorabilia, the vestiges of that time. These are pictures of the family, and also signs of a tradition that still is very popular today, the bullfights. Back in the days, they happened in these open courts. Now they are happening in a special bullfight arena, but they are still very popular today. And here's some notes on the village, the painting. You can see the Rossio Palace here distinctively as the most prominent building in the village, next to a church, a beautiful church from the Templars, a great wedding venue. And here from another angle, you can see how imposing the building is. And then the cobblestone streets in the village. And all the buildings in the village are kept at 2 stories high. It's not possible to build higher. So Rossio Palace, due to its size, it clearly stands out. Besides the main palace, there's also a series of buildings in the property which had different purposes. So some buildings were for housing employees, storage place, etc. One of those is where an olive oil mill existed, and you can still see the machinery that was used at the time. And it's adorned by beautiful hand-painted tiles, which are going to be preserved, and this in particular is going to become a spa. So the project for Rossio Palace is to convert this beautiful palace and all the dependency buildings into a deluxe hotel that is co-owned by all the investors. So the investors have a slice, not just of the apartment rooms, but of all the facilities in the entire property. And it is qualifying for the reduced golden visa, the 280K golden visa. So a little more insight into the project. You can see a map of the property here, where the palace is here at the top in front of the plaza, which is called Rossio Plaza. That's where the name derives. And then there's a series of buildings around, including swimming pool, barbecue areas. There's event spaces, more apartment rooms. The olive oil mill is here, which is going to be converted into a spa. And then more apartment buildings, also a cafe. And then gardens. So the gardens are rustic land that cannot be built. They have very old olive trees. So in a sense, Rossio Palace is a bit of a world in itself, because there's all the activities in the palace, like restaurant, bar, lounges, etc. Then everything happening in the dependencies and the rest of the property, with the gardens, swimming pool, etc. And then a gateway to explore the region with all the activities that it's possible, all the nature activities mostly that are possible in the area. Here you can see a picture taken from the main plaza with Rossio Palace on the background. And this is a picture except one element that is simulated, which is the tower you can see here at the top. And this is a very interesting add-on. It's a tower that existed a long time ago. And because it existed, it was possible to license, because other than that, the building is protected. So it's not possible to change the facade of the building, but it was possible to add this observation tower at the top, which will require, of course, some interventions. There will be steel pillars to support it, and then a new concrete foundation underneath. And you can see here on the right, get a sense of how tall it is compared to everything else. This is like a skyscraper if you look at the proportions in the village. So this is the facade towards the plaza, and this is the facade towards the inside of the property. Now, let me share with you some pictures of how the property is today. So here you see the entrance hall as it is today, and then after the rehabilitation. In the entrance hall, there will not be many changes. So the tiles will be preserved, and the very beautiful stucco as well, recreated. Here we have a corridor. The main change is in terms of lightening it up. So the designer chose very light colors. For the wood panels in white, for the parquet, a lighter tone as well. Here, another view of the corridor, where some of the pictures of the photos from the old times will be used to evoke the history of the place. Now we are at the lobby. The lobby preserves this original pavement in stone. And then the beautiful tiles, the hand-painted tiles on the walls. Here we are at the lounge, which has moss on the walls from the natural park. And the colors evoke also the proximity with the park, with the green velvet and the brown. Here we are at the restaurant. The restaurant has many different sitting areas, both indoor and outdoor, and also a private dining area. This is one of those areas. Now we are in a room. This is an apartment room, and all rooms are equipped with kitchenettes. You can see here on the back. So it's not a full-fledged kitchen, but there are 3 modules, so good for light meal preparations. All the rooms have very high ceilings, very generous areas, and very high level of details and furnishing. And here we are at the top in the observation tower. So this is where you can enjoy a 360 view over the village and the surrounding natural park. And it's a multi-purpose area used for eating, as a lounge, also some high tables. So you can sit, bring your computer, sip a cup of coffee, and enjoy the scenery. The construction is starting now. So the site is now being prepared. We are doing geological surveys. We have already the construction permit. So it is about to start still in Q1, and it is expected to finish on Q4 2024. So at the end of last year. And of course, if there are delays that impact the opening of the hotel, then the contractor will have to pay a penalty fee to the investors to compensate for that. So the hotel opening is scheduled for the first quarter of 2025. And even though the opening is still some time away, the marketing and the branding has already begun. And I will comment on it a little later. But before I do that, let me share with you the underlying business in Rossio Palace. So a recap. So Rossio Palace is a property in co-ownership. So the investors own a share of all the apartment rooms, all the public spaces, swimming pools, restaurants, everything. There's a business of hotel operation that pays a yield, and then an exit strategy where all the investors sell their investment shares and then benefit from the capital appreciation. There's a stay included, which is needed for the Golden Visa requirements, either in Rossio Palace or in other hotels, which I will show in a minute. And then finally, the Golden Visa, the reduced investment of 280K. And in this case, there's no need to pay the IMT, which is the transaction tax on property sales, because it is a rehabilitation. So the investors don't need to have that expense. Now, to understand the business, let me share with you the hotel, a little bit about the hotel operations. And there's more detail on this in our investor portal. So I will just cover a few key points. First of all, in terms of revenue, a hotel business, of course, depends on how many rooms. In this case, it's a boutique hotel, so we have 50 apartment rooms. And then the two key drivers are the average rate for those rooms, which for Rossio Palace is 240 euros, and then the occupancy rate, which is 75, the projection. And there's a ramp-up period over the years when the hotel opens. Of course, we are still consolidating the partnerships and the reviews, everything. So the hotel management company takes a few years to get that into the optimal revenue level. And to give you a sense of numbers, here you can see a benchmark for the luxury boutique hotels globally. So this is a global data point. It's published by STR. And it's a little bit old. It's from 2016, but it's the latest one they published. And to give you a sense of the numbers, occupancy rates at that time were 73%, and the average rate was $324 US. Of course, now with inflation, those numbers will be probably above 400, but this gives you a sense in global terms. Now let's delve into the region we are at. So in the region we are at, you can see here a few interesting hotel operations. So Rossio Palace is here on this golden dot, and around the area, there are interesting hotels that charge high prices. They have good average daily rates, and that is because they have unique experiences. They have something distinctive about them. Land Vineyards, for example, is all about wine. Marmaris Hotel, everything is about marble because it's close to a marble production site. The Convent of Évora, it's an old convent, so it relives, it recreates that history of the convent. São Lourenço, this one is very interesting. It's close to the border with Spain as well. It charges a very high price, and they were able to create a very unique experience. Being in a farm, if you try to book a room now, you'll be paying, this is for April, you'll be paying around 680 starting price to stay in the winery room. You pay even more if you stay in other rooms. If you try to book in May, most of the dates, it's not even available anymore because the weather starts becoming good and the tourism really starts picking up in May. If you go to booking.com and see this unit, it's not that posh or sophisticated. It's actually the experience of being in a farm. So this is the old buildings that used to house the workers in the farm. And you can see the interior is also not that extravagant or anything. It's quite simple, quite modest. Yet they have 9.5 rating in booking.com, and the guests love the experience and are willing to pay a very hefty price to stay there. And if you read the reviews, you will see that the experience of being in the farm, it's a very unique experience of hearing the birds singing, getting exposure to the ingredients that they have in production there in the farm and also from the region. So all that creates an experience for the guests and their families that it's unforgettable. And that's what people take away. And that's why they're willing to pay so much. So this is an example of a very successful boutique hotel because precisely they were able to create this distinctive experience. Now, of course, when a hotel operates, it's not just the ability to create revenue that matters. It's the ability to also service customers, provide a great experience in a cost-effective manner. And in Rossio Palace, the hotel management company has a big advantage. And that is that in the city of Porto Alegre, which is 25 minutes away, there are two sources of talent, two sources of staff, highly trained. One is the School of Hotel and Tourism, which trains students with practical degrees. So chefs, receptionists, gardeners, etc., maintenance crews, they come from here. And then there's the university with more advanced degrees in hotel operations and hotel management. So this is a great source of talent because nowadays it's extremely hard, not just to attract talent, but also to retain. So there's always a talent war in the hotel industry. And this is a big advantage for to win that war in a cost-effective manner. One thing that is worth mentioning, Rossio Palace is in a protected area. The village itself is protected. It's not possible to build more than 2 stories high. And the whole area is protected. It's not possible to build new. New construction is not allowed. So it's only possible to rebuild something that already exists, which is the case of Rossio Palace. It's being rehabilitated based on the existing property. So the park is preserved by a series of entities at the national and municipal level that mean that this treasure of the park will be preserved, and Rossio Palace will benefit from being so well positioned in a region where it's not possible to have competition because it is not possible to build anything new. Now, to give you a sense of how much is a hotel worth upon sale, a hotel is basically depending on the business. The worth of the hotel is depending on the worth of the business. So a good hotel, a hotel that charges a high price, that has a high occupancy, it's of course worth much more than a hotel that has a low level of service and charges cheap prices. This is a bit like going to a restaurant. How much is a restaurant worth? There's cheap restaurants, there's high-end restaurants, and they have, of course, very different value. In the hotel industry, the average value is given by a multiple of the EBITDA, which is a measure of the cash or the profits that the hotel unit is able to generate. And traditionally, historically, that number is around 20. In the good times, it goes a bit above to 22. In the not so good times, a little bit lower. Right now, we are still emerging from COVID. So they're still, the multiples are still a little on the low side. You can see here for some of the big companies, they have anything within that range, some of them even below the 18. That's because there's still this recovery ongoing. But normally the value is around 20. So of course that the value is highly linked to the business, and the businesses that perform well are those that are able, of course, to charge a high revenue for what they offer because they have some kind of competitive advantage, and they are able to do that at a cost-effective manner with good gross operating profits. I will not go into too much detail, but if you are interested in our investor portal, you'll be able to access more detailed information, including the cash flows of the investment over time and different scenarios. I just want to mention the key number here, which is the gross internal rate of return of around 6%. That is, if you take the cash flows into consideration over the lifetime of the investment, this is the return before taxes. Of course, then the government will levy the taxes, 28%, both on the yield and on the capital gains. But before taxes is around 6%. So this is designed to be a hedge, at least against inflation, so you don't lose value to inflation. Now, as I mentioned, there's already a marketing and a branding that has begun with Rossio Palace. And this is featured in a series of very high quality organic products. For example, the olive oil, which is not produced in Rossio Palace, it's produced in a neighboring facility. But it is an extremely high quality olive oil, which is sold in Portugal and abroad. It's sold mainly in the Nordic markets, in Sweden, in Denmark, in Germany, and is complemented by a series of other products. Almonds and walnuts, all carrying the brand of Rossio Palace in very high-end organic products. Now, as to the stay, so in this package, there is a stay, which of course the investors and their families need to, in order to have the golden visa renewed and approved at the end. And the stay can be 1 week if it is in high season, so summer, Christmas, and Easter, or 3 weeks if it is done in low season. And it can be used in Rossio Palace or in 2 other units, which I will show you next. Besides this free accommodation, there's also a 25% in any additional purchases that investors make, be it accommodation, food and beverage, or any services. The other 2 units to diversify are located in the south of Portugal, in Albufeira. And they are units close to the beach. So if you want to diversify the experience, then of course you can benefit from those 2 units. This one was opened in July. It features a nice rooftop swimming pool, and it's also very close to the beach. So different experience so that you can choose which one you are more interested on. Now, the developer behind Rossio Palace is Rosenborg Properties. It's a Danish company. And the focus of Rosenborg is on rehabilitating prime old buildings for different purposes. Some of the building rehabilitations are residential. This is an example of a villa that we are completing in Copenhagen. This is a simulation of how it will look once it is completed. It's very close. You can see this is a picture from the inside, and you can see the level of details on the stucco, for example, the craftsmanship there, on the wood panels. So a very high level standard, catering to a very high-end clientele. But it's not just residential. We also work with rehabilitation of other types of properties. For example, a pack house. This is a pack house that was converted into an office space, where all the structural elements were preserved to give this very rustic and old feeling. In Portugal, we also have new construction. This is one example, Vila Maria, a hotel that we opened in July, and it's one of the hotels where investors can stay. And we are in the process of licensing a unit in Silves, also in Algarve, a little bit more in the interior, which is going to be a wellness resort, and we expect to have it licensed early next year. A brief words on the team. I am the project manager. I'm a civil engineer, so I oversee all the engineering and architecture, etc., on the projects. Mathilde, who is also on this webinar and will probably speak later, is a sales manager, so she's responsible for the branding, the commercial activities. Nadia is responsible for all the design, Peter for the hotel operations and agreements with the hotel management companies, and Bernardo is responsible for overseeing the construction works. Now, let me share with you an important question right now, which is how to apply, and most of all, how to apply in time before a change happens. Is it even possible? It is possible, but it has to be done fast. So first of all, Rossio Palace ticks all the boxes for the reduced golden visa. The project is licensed, the construction permit is issued, and it's located in an urban rehabilitation area and in a low density area. So in terms of the investment, all the criteria are met. Now, of course, we need the investor as well to have all the personal documentation needed. So let me share with you, first of all, an overview into the entire golden visa process. It starts with the online submission. So that online submission is done after you reserve and invest. When you reserve and invest, then with the personal documentation, we can do the submission. After the submission is done, CEF, which is the entity approving the golden visa, will issue a pre-approval and will schedule a biometrics appointment where you will need to come in person and do the biometrics and then submit the original documentation that was submitted online prior to that. And then there will be renewals. So when the golden visa is approved, it's valid for 2 years. So we will have to renew it 2 times. There will be a first renewal after 2 years and then a second renewal after 2 years again. And then after 5 years, it is possible to have the permanent residency and or the citizenship, the EU citizenship. And that is dependent on keeping the investment for those 5 years and meeting the minimum stay requirements, which is 2 weeks for every renewal, for every 2 years. And also doing the language exam. So learning a little bit of Portuguese will also be necessary. And after this process, then we are indeed in a position to have the permanent residency permit and the EU citizenship. So let's talk about the process of applying. So what specifically do we need to submit the golden visa application? And this is the process that is needed. It starts with the Portuguese tax ID. To get the Portuguese tax ID, we will need just the passport and a proof of address and also a power of attorney for the lawyer to be able to do that on your behalf. It's done online and it's relatively fast. It takes 3 to 4 days. Then we move to open the bank account. Once we have the NIF, we can open the bank account. And the bank account, depending on which bank, it can take many weeks, or if it's done with our partner bank, which is one of the biggest banks in Portugal, it takes only 7 days. So within 7 days, we can get the bank account operational, so ready to be used. And then the last part is the promissory purchase. So this is the investment track. The promissory purchase is what allows the submission to be done because the investment is realized. At the same time, when we have these, while we are following these steps, we are also collecting the personal documentation, collecting and legalizing it. So let me share with you what exactly do we need to apply. And we do have companies that we partner with to help with the process of collecting and legalizing those documents. So here's what we need. We need different documentation depending if it's the main applicant, the spouse, the child, or parent. And also, some documentation does need to be legalized. The one that needs to be legalized is the one you see here with this blue mark and this shade. So let's go briefly through it so you understand what is needed. For the main applicants, we need a passport, the proof of address. This is for the NIF and the bank account, an occupation proof. If you don't have an occupation proof, then something that states the source of the funds. And then we need a tax ID and a criminal record, both of which need to be legalized. And as I mentioned, to legalize, it can be done in the countries that follow the Hague Convention, it's the apostille. And in those that don't follow, then it has to be in the consulate of Portugal in those countries. There are companies that help facilitate and expedite the process because it can take a while if it's not through those companies. For the spouse, we need also the passport. We need also an address proof. This is to obtain the NIF. We don't need an occupation proof. We don't need a tax ID. We will need a criminal record and the marriage certificate. Then for the child or parents, so the remaining of the family, we will need a passport. No need for address proof or occupation proof. No need for tax ID. We will need a criminal record if they have more than 16 years old. If they have less, there's no need. And then the certificates, the birth certificates. And also in case the child is more than 18 years old, we will also need a certificate that is not married, that is still dependent on the parents. And for applicants that are above 65, then we will also need a certificate, an additional certificate to state that they are also dependent. So this is the documentation that is needed. Once this documentation is compiled and the one that needs to be legalized, we are ready to submit the golden visa and we have everything that is needed. So how much does it cost? The project investment costs a little over 280,000, 282,500. So besides the 280 that are required to invest, there's the stamp duty and the notary fees. The IMT tax is not paid by the investors. Then there are the immigration costs, which for the application amount to around 6,000 euros. And then with the 2 renewals that are needed, a little over 6,000. So in total, for the entire process, it's around 12,400 per applicant. And then there are the attorney fees, which vary, change depending on which attorneys you work with. It can be anything from 10,000 to 8,000. So in Rossio Palace, as I mentioned, we do offer a protection. Of course, that the protection is on the project investment. So the immigration costs to CEF, some of it will have to be paid upon submitting, but it's a small amount. And the attorney fees, an installment will also need to be paid. Those are paid to those entities, so they are not covered by the protection. But the protection we offer in Rossio Palace is in our contracts. In case there is a change in the law before that impacts you, you are not able to apply, or you apply, but because of that change in the law, your application is rejected. Then you are entitled to a full refund of all the amounts you have spent investing in the project. Of course, the legal fees and the fees paid to CEF, they will not be possible to get back. But as I mentioned, those are minor fees. So this protection means that you basically have, if in the worst case scenario, things don't go as planned, your reservation deposit or the investment you made will be returned. And this is something we are offering for the very last investment slots in Rossio Palace, because of course we are mindful that there are some risks in investing right now. Now, we do have met the threshold for the project to move forward. We acquired the property in January, at the end of January. So the property is already acquired. We are moving to the construction. So we do have the investment is moving forward. For the last investments, we are offering this benefit. And this is, of course, valid for a very short period while the golden visa still exists, which it's a matter of weeks before it can be terminated. So what exactly are the next steps if you want to benefit from this last chance and from this protection? The next steps are, first of all, to go to our website and register to be part of this fast-track application. If you have an attorney, then your attorney can work in our investor portal and can use our bank partnership to expedite the process for you. If you don't have a partner, then we have a series of law firms that we work with that we can also refer you to. So once you submit your name, email, and phone, our team will contact you so we can get started. And here is where the application is managed. It's through our investor portal. So you and your attorney will have access to it. And the first thing that you will need to do is to register the applicants and do the KYC. So that's the very first step. It can be done online. It's a form that you need to fill, and then you add your passport. And with that, you will generate the KYC form, you will sign it, upload it, and that will be ticked. In the investor portal, you will also be able to work together with your attorney. So at any point in time, you can write a message to us or to your attorney to clarify any questions using the message center. So you are always sure to get a fast and quick reply, which is needed at this time. And you can also follow your application by looking at the checklist. So following the process. Once you have the NIF, you have the bank account open, all the documentation needed, so you can follow also that progress. So if you want to get started, because time is of the essence, you can drop me an email at philip@rossiopalace.com, and I or our team will help you get started fast. And you can also schedule a meeting to learn more, to ask questions, and to become more familiar with the investment and the application process by going to meeting.rossiopalace.com.